Hey everyone! It's been a hot minute, I know, but I'm here to bring you something. Initially, it was going to be just in time for Halloween, but it's just after Halloween now, so I can't say that anymore, but here it is! I wasn't planning on having anything at all for spooky season, actually, just because I've been super busy. I started in a new job, all this kind of stuff, but wow, okay, something totally took me by surprise. I recently watched Midnight Mass on Netflix, and wow, 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 wow. Oh my god, amazing stuff, you guys. I'm still thinking about it, like weeks after finishing it. So that's how you know it's good, right? I drew a little something for it because I was just so taken by the show. So let's chat a little bit about it while I do this work. Also, I do apologize ahead of time because I recently moved to a new apartment. I don't know how the acoustics sound in here yet. I don't know how loud the guy who drives his stupid fast car down my street is gonna sound, but if it happens, I'm sorry. Know that I'm not in control of that happening. So, longtime viewers already know this, but I use Catholic iconography all the time in my art. It's pretty near and dear to me since I was raised Catholic, so I grew up seeing this sort of imagery all the time, all around me, constantly. There's a lot of attention to detail, which is the kind of thing that just makes my artist brain so happy. There's like a whole secret code for this stuff that you can hide in your art, which is really fun when you start to pick up on it. You kind of feel like you're in on the little joke, sort of. Plus, I've got a lot of random info about this stuff floating around in my head because, again, I grew up with it. So I might as well make something cool out of it, right? I think that's a big part of why Midnight Mass resonated with me so much. It was written and directed by Mike Flanagan. He's the guy behind The Haunting of Hill House and Bly Manor, which both of those I still need to watch. I'll get around to it at some point, I promise. But he was also raised in the Catholic Church. I did a little research, looked at some interviews because I was really curious. I think it's pretty evident in all of the small bits and pieces he includes in Midnight Mass. Plus, the way he kind of grapples with religion feels critical in kind of a loving way. Like, it definitely feels like some of the characters in the show are people that he knows in real life, or are based on people he knows in real life. And I mean that in both a positive and negative way. If anyone watching has already watched the show, you'll totally know what I mean. Midnight Mass also definitely feels like the kind of show that was created with someone who has a lot to say about Catholicism as an institution, but also has kind of like a fondness for the religion because of nostalgia and whatever else. And that's something I can really relate to, I think. Hoo boy, not to get heavy here on the channel or anything. I'm kind of getting ahead of myself too. Some of y'all might be asking, okay, what even is this show though? Which, like, of course you could use Google, but just like humor me, okay, right? You're watching my video for a reason. Let's talk. So Midnight Mass is a mini-series about a small island off the coast of, I think, probably New England. It's definitely northeastern America. It's predominantly Irish Catholic, which you can really clearly tell when you look at all the names of all the different stores. The church is called St. Patrick's. Like, there's only one thing it could be. It's Irish Catholic, baby. The town that makes up this island is slowly creeping its way towards obscurity. There's only like 150 people on the island total, and its economy is dying because of all kinds of problems with fishing and pollution and all this other stuff, right? But then, a new mysterious priest arrives to temporarily replace the community's aging pastor, and you'll never believe this, but weird things start to happen. Imagine that, right? The story is told primarily from the perspective of Riley Flynn, who's returning to the island after spending 4 years in prison for killing a young woman in a drunk driving accident. And honestly, if you haven't watched the show yet, I don't really want to tell you much more about it. I went in totally blind beyond what I just mentioned, and I had a really awesome time with it. There's a possibility that if you've looked up anything about the show at all, you might already know what the horror aspect, I guess, what the monster aspect of the show is, but on the off chance that you haven't, don't look it up. Just start watching it. I promise. You will not be disappointed. If you like horror and you like the trappings of religion, and also a surprisingly sweet and heartfelt message, I say just go for it. Alright, so all of that out of the way, my endorsement of the show, my love of it, all that kind of thing, let's get into the spoiler zone. So for those who haven't seen the show and don't want spoilers, you can skip ahead or mute until this timestamp here. Alright? All good? Okay, that's your last warning. Dies. I was not expecting Midnight Mass to be about vampires. What a dope choice, honestly, oh my god. I thought for sure it was going to be demons because that's kind of an obvious choice when you're dealing with religious horror. But going with vampires, you get this really excellent and I think kind of obvious parallel between a vampire's need for blood and specifically Catholicism's preoccupation with blood. There's also the additional theme of addiction, which you get through Riley's struggle with alcoholism and the clear parallel with vampirism there. The show, it never really calls the vampires vampires, which I kind of appreciate. I know that some people were kind of felt like that was pretentious to not just call them like they are, but I feel like we should be used to that by now, right? There's plenty of zombie media that doesn't call zombies zombies, even though we know that's what they are. So, I don't know, I think we should cut it some slack, because I really like the treatment of that aspect of the show, that the horror isn't framed necessarily in such an obvious way. I don't know, maybe I'm the one who sounds pretentious now, who knows. Regardless, I really love all the discussions that the characters have kind of surrounding these things as they're happening. Especially, I love Riley and Father Paul's discussion about the guilt and responsibility and how it applies to their actions. That's kind of the theme throughout, right? Where you begin to question, well, how much of this vampirism thing is really unavoidable? And I think it's super interesting that Father Paul claims that he has, first off, no guilt, and also no real responsibility for killing someone out of his vampiric hunger, because he claims that the bloodlust is unavoidable. And I just think that's so neat, because from his religious perspective, that makes perfect sense. He has this whole mentality of God's will and what God wants him to do, because he views the vampirism as a gift from God, which again, awesome. As soon as they brought in the vampire and only exclusively referred to it as an angel, oh my god, I was there. I was losing my mind watching this show. I'm not sure if you can tell. I also love that this perspective that Father Paul has, his lack of guilt, has Riley absolutely pissed. And not only pissed, but he's also jealous because of his struggles with the guilt of his previous actions and his whole character arc that goes throughout the whole series, and how that ties into other people's arcs and their view of their own actions, or whether or not they're redeemable, all this kind of stuff. Oh my god, there's just so much to talk about. I want to talk about it forever, but I don't want to come across as too insane, so I just kind of put it into this YouTube video. So thanks for listening, guys. I appreciate that. Again, as someone who was raised religious, I think it's really awesome to see a show explore how faith affects people's lives for better or for worse, right? Let's be honest. If Beverly Keene didn't exist, would the whole turn the island into vampires plan really have gone so poorly? Because she's the reason why the mob mentality in the end kicks in and causes the whole town to go all fire and brimstone, and we're lighting all this shit up and all this kind of thing, right? Without her, part of me thinks that Father Paul would probably have maintained his hold over the community much better. But then again, I don't know. He's kind of a baby. Father Paul is kind of a little bitch boy. I'm gonna say it. You heard it here first. The priest is kind of a little bitch. And I say that out of love, okay? I love him very much. But I think that things would have gone less poorly if Beverly Keene was not involved, which of course, look at her. Oh my god, everyone who watches this show can't stand her. Which, kudos to her actress. She really killed it. She's insufferable. Regardless, I just really love that the relationship between characters in this show and their religion is super nuanced and real in that way. You have all these gradients of awfulness. You don't just have Beverly Keenes, is what I'm saying. You have plenty of people who you're oh, that's someone's parent that I know, right? Or maybe that's my parent. There's also that too. But I think that's what's so great about the show. Plus, look, hear me out. If my local priest turned out to be a sexy vampire, I probably wouldn't be too torn up. Just saying. Just saying. Alright, welcome back, non-spoiler folks. And let's talk about the art, shall we? So, right from the start, I knew I had to draw our lovely young priest, Father Paul Hill. Yeah, you heard me. He's fine, okay? He can get it. It had to be said. But beyond his looks, I just love the direction his character takes throughout the whole show and all of the themes and motifs that fit him so well. He's just, perfect subject for this drawing. Let's go down the checklist I made for myself when brainstorming for this piece. First, I definitely wanted to mimic the composition of saintly icons that you see especially in Orthodox churches, Greek or Russian Orthodox. Usually they depict the saint from the torso up, and with several items in their hands that help to identify them. I've kind of gone into this in previous videos because it's something that I've used before in my art, and I will continue to use because it's super cool. So for Father Paul, I wanted to focus on the chalice because communion is obviously a really pivotal plot and thematic device in Midnight Mass. There wasn't really anything else beyond that I wanted to give him, so for his other hand that isn't holding the chalice, I just went with a raised gesture that's kind of similar to ones you see in biblical art. Lots of hands pointing or upturned towards the sky, kind of calling attention to a heavenly presence or God or, what have you. Though I guess in Midnight Mass, the heavenly presence isn't quite so heavenly. I knew I wanted to emphasize the connection between Father Paul and his angelic benefactor, so I made sure to highlight the stream of blood from the angel's wrist, kind of traveling down and dripping into his waiting hand. It's also dripping from the chalice. If you look really close, I only added a little bit of blood there. And of course, Father Paul also had to indulge a bit, so I added the blood around his mouth too. So, looking a bit at the background elements, I used Gothic decor as inspiration for the frame. I also looked a lot at tabernacle designs because they tend to have that same Gothic flair. There's lots of broken arches and spiky bits, as I like to call them. That is the technical term, of course. And lots of overlapping shapes too. And obviously, I had to include a halo as well, which, hey, at least this time, it feels especially fitting. Mike Flanagan clearly thought so too, because hey, check it out, in this shot, the church's rose window also gives Father Paul a little halo. Adorable. Another important detail that I almost forgot to mention is the eyes. So, certain characters in Midnight Mass, I'm censoring myself again for spoilers here, once they're afflicted with a certain illness, let's go with that, they get this really cool effect where their eyes reflect light. It's clearly meant to look like the tapetum lucidum, which is a fancy Latin term for when you see your cat or dog at night and they look like they're possessed. I was so stoked to see that they included that in the show because it looks awesome and super spooky on a human face, so I made sure to include it here. Now, for the vestments. These took, forever. Literally forever. I was torn between Lent and Easter colors, because both have important meanings in Midnight Mass. In the end, I chose Easter, partially because it has some other great imagery I wanted to use, and also because the theme of rebirth was, I think, the most fitting. For the embroidery on his chasuble, I chose the pelican. That seems like a weird one, I know, but I promise it makes sense. It's a symbol of self-sacrifice in Catholicism because, according to an ancient legend, in difficult times, pelicans will wound themselves to feed their young with their own blood. Pretty gnarly, right? Pretty cool. I don't know if it has any truth to it, but parallels are often drawn between this legend and Jesus' suffering and death in exchange for his children's, our, atonement. Pretty neat, right? Plus, of course, the blood motif was perfectly in line with Midnight Mass's visuals. And I think that's about all I've got for you guys today. I'll leave you to watch the rest of the speed paint in peace, and I'll see you at the end. Hey y'all, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and let me know your thoughts on the art and the show in the comments. I love hearing everyone's thoughts. And until next time, stay safe and healthy. Bye!